My first experience of Julian Assange's work was when I saw the infamous WikiLeaks videos of the duck shooting in Iraq, the murders of those innocent people trying to cross the square in Baghdad. They were journalists, I think. And I then learnt of the connection with Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning. And over the next few weeks, I learnt of the connection with WikiLeaks. My name's Tony Kevin. I used to be an Australian ambassador. My last postings were to Cambodia and to Poland. I used to be very much part of the Western Alliance Cold War against Russia. In fact, my first posting was to Russia, and I've written a book about that recently called Return to Moscow, which I recommend everybody to seek out in your local library or bookshop and try to read. It's an alternative, contrarian view of why everything's gone so pear-shaped in East-West relations over the last few years. Basically, it's our fault, it's the West's fault. But now to come back to the importance of Julian, and he's terribly important. I've never met him, I've never corresponded directly with him, but I have, in a sort of a way, become part of the campaign for his decent treatment. This is about two things. It's firstly about his global significance as one of the most important campaigners, or the most important, I believe, campaigner for accountability and respect for the Nuremberg Law's principle that just following orders is not a defense against war crimes. Julian's work exposing all those documents that the United States would have never wished to have exposed has been enormously important in giving a whole population of people around the world a real understanding of how great powers behave when they're on the ropes, as the United States is now. That's the first reason, his global significance as a fighter for free speech. The second reason is quite simply as a fellow Australian. I'm an Australian, I carry my passport proudly. Julian is an Australian. He should be able to count on the protection of his government when he gets into trouble overseas. He is in just as much trouble in Britain as Peter Gresti was in Egypt or as James Ricketson was in Cambodia. And yet, the Australian government is doing boodidly squat, nothing, zilch, nada for him in his present predicament in England. Now, Australia is not a colony of the UK. We do not have to doff the cap or tug the forelock to our former masters. We're an independent country. We are actually in many ways more powerful than the UK these days. That's arguable, but I'll throw it out there as a proposition. There's absolutely no reason for him not to walk out of the Ecuador embassy a free man without a British charge hanging over him. That's stage one, getting that in the bag. Stage two, equally important, is for the Australian High Commissioner in London, a man by the name of George Brandis, to actually drive in his Commonwealth car, perhaps with a British police escort, perhaps not necessary, I don't know, to the Ecuador embassy, to pick up Julian, to drive him to Heathrow Airport, to drive him out onto the tarmac, which as a High Commissioner or Ambassador he can arrange to do, and put him in the safety of a Qantas plane, which conveniently has a regular flight, non-stop, Heathrow to Perth. Now, when Julian gets to Australia, some people, some cynical people say, well, of course, the Australian government would immediately hand him over to the Americans. Now, I beg to differ with that. I think once Julian were here, there would be a huge outcry if anything like that were contemplated. There would be the feeling, well, we've got him home, he's our fellow citizen, from now on we're going to protect him, and bugger the alliance, I'm sorry. So to me, it's a fairly simple game plan. We need to get him to the airport, we need to get him onto the plane, we need to get him to Australia. And then we can, I believe, safely keep him in Australia. We are a sovereign country. We do not have to kowtow to the Americans, and they haven't made any charges against him. And I think they'd be rather reluctant to once he was here in Australia, because we are a member of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing agreement. I think we have to be bold. We have to actually take our courage and try to see how it goes. And if enough people in Australia take this view, I believe we can make real progress.
Thank you. That was a terrific statement. The US Constitution forbids the classification of any information that would reveal a crime. So if it becomes illegal to publish information that would reveal a crime, doesn't crime win?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure you're right. I can't go too far down that track. I'm just a former practicing diplomat. So a little bit out of my pay grade, that sort of question.
Well, I mean, it's sort of common sense. That's one of those common sense arguments.
On a level of common sense, I certainly agree with you.
I was going to also ask you, why is it different for Julian Assange? We usually give aid to drug smugglers, and we give aid immediately to other, maybe they're just easier cases because they're just criminal, not political.
I guess it's different because of the sheer huge scale and importance of what he has done. He has exposed the dark underbelly of the deep state, of the United States deep state, in a way that means that the world will never be the same again. I don't think that people like Caitlin Osborne could have got going without the work of Julian Assange. I don't think that I could have got going. I don't think that the people in England who are exposing the Integrity Initiative and exposing the Institute of Statecraft and exposing the fantasy of the Skripal's poisoning, all this stuff going on, Julian has opened the door to all of that. He led the way. If you want to give it a religious analogy, he's the John the Baptist. He's the one who was the precursor, who made everything possible.
Well, getting back to a legal context, 40,000 cases, court cases, couldn't have got off the ground without WikiLeaks evidence. That's how many cases that WikiLeaks evidence has been accepted in worldwide.
That's amazing. Can I say something about the alleged connection with Russia? Because it's a canard that it keeps coming up over and over again.
Yes. One of the comments today, when we were talking, we had Craig Murray on today, was that it was a carefully scribbled narrative. I really like that one.
Well, I mean, what we know now is that pretty much whenever MI5 or MI6 open their mouth in a public statement, or outliers like Honorary Colonel Christopher Nigel Donnelly, if you see their lips moving, they're probably lying, because what they say is so full of lies, and they lie carelessly and confidently, and they've been doing it for centuries, I'm afraid. The British have always been very good at lying and very good at presenting a false image of themselves. I speak as someone of Irish descent, so I sort of know the backside of British imperialism, which unfortunately the United States has inherited in spades. Anglo-American imperialism now is alive and well. Unfortunately, we're seeing it again in Venezuela. I wish Julian was out and free to speak about what's happening in Venezuela like right now. I'm sure he'd have a huge amount to say.
Oh, yes. Well, Rafael Correa did when he mentioned that Ecuador's non-intervention in Venezuela was part of the deal when Paul Manafort came to visit Lenin Moreno, along with turn a blind eye to Chevron oil and let a US base back into the country. And, oh yes, Lenin Moreno threw in the head of Julian Assange to sweeten the deal, because it was debt relief as well, substantial amount. Have you been looking into what the Integrity Initiative have been doing? I mean, we found out very disturbingly that they are funded through the Institute of Statecraft by the British Foreign Office, and that they have been engaged in smearing the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, but also Julian Assange through what they call the Spanish cluster, the Integrity Initiative being an international group of journalists, politicians, academics, and intelligence officers. Have you got any comments about the Integrity Initiative and what that's doing, Julian?
Yes, I've been trying to interest the Australian mainstream media in actually reporting on the massive leak of Integrity Initiative and Institute for Statecraft documents, which was carried out by the hacker, quote, anonymous, unquote, several weeks ago. It's terribly important what they've done. What they've done is they've exposed a massive British disinformation collective who are there simply, primarily, although they say they do other things, but I think that's just covering, they put out massive amounts of disinformation 24/7 about Russia, about Russian policies. They seem to be obsessed with the so-called Russian threat. They'll have a go at Julian, yes, they'll have a go at Jeremy Corbyn, they'll have a go at anybody who, in their feverish minds, can be somehow connected, plausibly or implausibly, with Russia. I think they really need mental help, these people. They are old, angry men, mostly men, a few women. They're fanatical, they're dangerous, and they're quite good technically at what they do. When they talk about setting up clusters, well, they're really clusters of disinformation. And they know that if you repeat a lie often enough from enough different sources, it acquires a certain amount of credibility simply through repetition and familiarity. And that's why they're trying to set up these clusters all around the world, because they want to have networks of messages going everywhere all the time that basically keep repeating the same lies.
Well, it seems to be a Cold War type lie, which is beating some drums for a hot one. But wouldn't you agree that there's some element of it that is partisan as well when it attacks the leader of a party, the Labour Party?
It certainly is. I mean, they are, if you like, the last roar of the old imperialist British line. They go back a long way, these people. Most of them are in their 50s and 60s. They're not young. Most of them aren't young. They're the kinds of people, I think, who, not to bring politics into it too much, but a lot of them would be supportive of Brexit. They're certainly supportive of an imperial Britain that, punches above its weight in the world. We have quite a few people like this in Australia too, unfortunately, but I haven't been able to uncover at this point any evidence of a cluster of influence in Australia. Maybe we didn't need a cluster of influence because maybe we're all in the bag already.
A long time ago, Tony, perhaps.
Well, maybe we're all in the bag already. I would say the vast majority of people in Australia purport to take part in public debate on questions of foreign affairs and foreign policy already are thoroughly indoctrinated in anti-Russian and increasingly anti-Chinese attitudes. I think a lot of them don't really realise it anymore, just how indoctrinated they are. Because when you put it to them, look, we really should have an open debate on these things and different points of view going up against each other, somehow they always find a way to say no. It's not convenient, or the timing isn't right, or the programming isn't right, but they will never allow an open debate on questions of East-West relations, on questions of Russia and China. To most Australians, they only hear one side of the story.
Well, the source of their mental illness may be myopia of a kind. I mean, nobody wants a war, right? They don't really want to go the whole way. So why is it looking that way? Is that where we're going? Is it going to suit the arms industry that much that those kind of orders are given and obeyed? Or are these just career people who, as you say, don't realise what they're doing?
Well, I've been thinking about these issues for a long time, and a lot of my book, Return to Moscow, discusses these sorts of questions. I think there's a kind of a suspension of belief in the possibility of a real nuclear war between Russia and the West. They can, rather like George Orwell's 1984, they can reconcile contradictory ideas in their head at the same time. Orwell called it doublethink. On the one hand, Russia can destroy the world, which it can, and there's nothing America or Britain could do about it. The minute Russia unleashed its second strike deterrent force, it's curtains for all of us. I mean, that's simply a fact. And yet they set that aside and they say, well, no, Russia's actually a weak country and it's corrupt and weak and it's really just a big oil well and wheat farm, and we can basically tell Russia what to do. Now, this is completely illogical because a country that lost 27 million people in World War II, that has been invaded repeatedly from the West, is not, now that it has a self-respecting, strong government under Vladimir Putin, going to let anybody in the West tell it what to do, least of all Theresa May or Donald Trump. And so these people are dangerous warmongers, coming back to Integrity Initiative and Institute for Statecraft. They inhabit a cloud cuckoo land of fantasy. They think that if they keep on saying, we're strong and Russia's weak, we only need to get together and be morally strong and we will we will win, we will win, we will prevail, we will prevail. That's what Donnelly loves to say. We will prevail. I mean, everybody should really watch his YouTube, the 8-minute YouTube, when he's doddering around in his kitchen, looking like something out of a John le Carré novel, you know, George Smiley on his recreation day, saying, oh, well, we will prevail, but we have to fight this war and we have to win this war. My God, it is so ridiculous, really.
It's barbaric, isn't it? Well, thank you very much, Tony Kevin, for speaking to us this evening.